1. Nazi experiments on people. A series of medical experiments conducted on a large number of prisoners in Nazi Germany on the territory of concentration camps during World War II. Prisoners were forced to participate in these experiments and, as a rule, experiments led to death, disfigurement, or loss of legal capacity. In Auschwitz and other camps under the leadership of Dr. Ed Waldwirtz, selected prisoners were subjected to various experiments that were designed to help German soldiers in combat situations, develop new weapons and methods of treatment of wounded German soldiers. These experiments were also carried out to promote the racial theory adhered to by the Third Reich. After the war, these experiments served as a reason for the Nuremberg Tribunal for Doctors, as well as the impetus for the development of the Nuremberg Code of Medical Ethics. 2. Experiments on twin children. In concentration camps were launched in order to detect similarities and differences in their genetics. The main figure in these experiments was Joseph Mengele, who experimented on more than 1,500 pairs of twins, of which only about 300 remained alive. Mengele conducted his experiments on the twins in the Auschwitz concentration camp. The twins were classified by age and gender and placed in special barracks. The experiments included injections of various chemicals into the eyes of the twins to check whether it was possible to change the color of the eyes. There were also attempts to stitch the twins in order to artificially create the Siamese twins. Experiments with attempts to change the color of the eyes often ended in severe pain, eye infection, and temporary or permanent blindness. Mengele also used a method of infection of one of the twins with subsequent autopsy of both subjects in order to study and compare the affected organs. 1. 3. Experiments on homosexual men. There is a lot of camp documentation on hormonal experiments on homosexual men prisoners in Buchenwald, which were conducted by secret SS decree by Dr. Karl Wernet. In 1943, Reichsfuhrer SS Heinrich Himmler, having learned about the research of Danish Dr. Wernet on the cure of homosexuality, invites him to conduct research in the Reich at the Buchenwald base. Human experiments were started by Wernet in July 1944. Detailed documentation of his operations has been preserved, as a result of which a capsule with male hormone was sewn into the groin of the homosexual prisoners of the camp, which was supposed to make them heterosexuals. Some of the prisoners agreed to the operation voluntarily in the hope of being released from the camp after healing. Prisoners who were operated on to sew as male hormone were sent to the Ravensbrück women's concentration camp, which held many women convicted of prostitution. The camp leadership instructed women to get closer to healed men and have sex with them. However, this did not completely eliminate the doubts of the camp leadership. 4. Experiments with hypothermia. In 1941, the Luftwaffe conducted a series of experiments to study hypothermia. During one of the experiments, a person was placed in a tank filled with cold water with ice for 3 hours. In another case, the prisoners were kept naked for several hours outside at a very low temperature. Experiments were conducted to identify various ways to save a person who suffered from hypothermia. These experiments were carried out for the High Command. Experiments were conducted on men to simulate the conditions that the German army had to endure on the Eastern Front, due to the fact that the German troops were poorly prepared for severe frosts. The experiments were conducted in Dachau and Auschwitz. Sigmund Rascher reported the data obtained directly to Heinrich Himmler, and also publicized the result of his experiments in 1942 at a medical conference called Medical Problems Caused by the Sea and Winter. The experiments were divided into 2 parts. Firstly, it was established how long a person could survive in low-temperature conditions, and secondly, how best to resuscitate a victim who had undergone frostbite. The most effective way to quickly lower the temperature of the human body was a tank filled with ice water. Young healthy men were selected for the experiment. Before the experiment, they were usually undressed naked and placed in a device that measures the decrease in the temperature of the human body. After that, the victims were dressed in Luftwaffe uniforms and placed in a cold water tank. In order to achieve the opposite effect, that is, to find out what warms a frozen person the fastest, 2 experiments were conducted. In the first case, the frozen man was placed between 2 naked women from among the prisoners of the camp. In the second case, the frozen person was lowered into a bath with hot water. The maximum effect of supercooling was achieved in the second case. As a result of the experiments, it was found that it is almost impossible to resuscitate the test subject if the back of his head was immersed in icy water. Therefore, a life jacket with a small headrest in the back of the head was developed. This detail did not allow the back of the skull to sink into water. Thus, there was no supercooling of the brainstem structures, and the probability of human salvation increased dramatically. 5. Experiments with malaria. From February 1942 to April 1945, experiments were conducted at the Dachau concentration camp to develop a malaria vaccine. Healthy camp residents aged 25 to 40 years were infected with malaria using mosquitoes or an injection of salivary gland extract from female mosquitoes. After infection, the prisoners underwent a course of treatment with various drugs in order to identify their effectiveness. More than 1,000 people were forced to participate in these experiments, half of whom died as a result of them. The experiments were conducted by SS Hauptsturmführer, Dr. Kurt Plottner. At the same time, the experience had a positive result. More than 10,000 German soldiers were rescued as a result of malaria infection. 6. Experiments with mustard gas. At various times, from September 1939 to April 1945, experiments were conducted in Sachsenhausen and other camps to identify the most effective method of treating wounds received from exposure to mustard gas. The test subjects were exposed to mustard gas and other vesicants, which caused severe chemical burns. The wounds of the victims of the experiments were examined to detect the most effective method of treating burns caused by mustard gas. Experiments with sulfonamide. From July 1942 to September 1943, experiments were carried out to study the effectiveness of sulfonamide, a synthetic antimicrobial agent. People were injured and infected with streptococcus, tetanus or anaerobic gangrene bacteria. Blood circulation was stopped with the help of tourniquets applied on both sides of the wound. Wood chips or glass were also placed in the wound. The infection was treated with sulfonamide and other drugs to determine their effectiveness. The experiments were led by Professor Gebhard. 7. Experiments with sea water. Experiments were conducted from approximately July to September 1944 in the Dachau concentration camp to study various methods of turning seawater into drinking water. In one case, a group of about 90 gypsies was deprived of food and received only sea water. As a result of this experiment, they were so dehydrated that the victims licked the recently washed floor in the hope of getting water. The experiments were conducted by Dr. Hans Eppinger. The person responsible for the experiments was Professor. 8. Sterilization experiments. Experiments were conducted from March 1941 to January 1945 in Auschwitz, Ravensbrück and other places under the guidance of Dr. Karl Klauberg. The purpose of the experiments was to create an effective method of sterilization that would be suitable for sterilizing millions of people with minimal time and effort. Experiments were carried out using X-rays, surgery, and various medicines. Thousands of people were sterilized during the experiments. In addition, the Nazi government sterilized about 400,000 people during the mandatory sterilization program. During the experiments, intravenous injections of iodine or silver nitrate were used. With the help of these injections, sterilization was successfully achieved, but they had a lot of side effects, such as vaginal bleeding, severe abdominal pain and cervical cancer. Therefore, radiation exposure was more preferable. It was found that a certain dose of X-rays can deprive the human body of the ability to produce sperm and eggs. Sterilization took place by deception. Prisoners were brought to the room and asked to fill out questionnaires, which took 2 to 3 minutes to fill out. At that time, they were exposed to radiation exposure, as a result of which the prisoners became completely infertile without knowing it. Many prisoners received serious radiation burns as a result of radiation. 9. Experiments with poisons. They were held from December 1943 to October 1944 in Buchenwald to investigate the effect of various poisons. Poisons were secretly added to the food of the participants of the experiments. Victims died as a result of poisoning or were immediately killed to perform an autopsy. In September 1944, the participants of the experiment were shot with bullets containing poison. 10. Experiments with incendiary mixtures. These experiments were carried out in Buchenwald from November 1941 to January 1944 to establish the effectiveness of various pharmaceuticals for the treatment of phosphorus burns. During the experiments, Prisoners were burned with phosphorus. 12. Experiment with monkeys and their mechanical mothers. 1950s, psychologist Harry Harlow decided to find out what is stronger, love or the survival instinct. He took the baby monkeys and placed them in cages with two mothers, one made of wire, the other made of soft fabric. The wire's mother gave milk, and the rag one only warmth and softness. The result shocked everyone. Monkeys, even hungry ones, clung to their soft mother, refusing to eat. Harlow proved that emotional connection is more important than biological need, but his method was recognized as one of the cruelest in the history of psychology. 13. Electroshock on consciousness, Milgram's experiment. 1961. Psychologist Stanley Milgram decided to find out to what extent a person is able to obey orders, even if they are against his conscience. The subjects were given a command to shock another person, allegedly for mistakes in the test. In fact, the current was fake, but the participants didn't know it. When the victim screamed in pain, many continued to press the button, because the scientist in the white coat said so. 65% of the participants brought the category to the maximum. So science has shown, ordinary people can become executioners if they are ordered by authority. 14. Tadpoles, hearts and soul transplantation, experiments with head transplants. In the 1970s, Soviet and American scientists seriously tried to transplant animal heads. There is a known case when academician Vladimir Demikhov transplanted a puppy's head onto the body of an adult dog. Both heads lived for several days, both drank and moved. In the United States, neurosurgeon Robert White transplanted a monkey's head to another body, and she woke up. The monkey could not move, but saw, blinked and reacted to stimuli. It was a breakthrough, and horror at the same time. The world saw that it was possible to transplant consciousness, but at what cost? 15. MKUltra Project, Mind Management Through Pain and Chemicals. 1953. The CIA launched a secret program under the MKUltra code. Thousands of people, often without their consent, were exposed to LSD, hypnosis, sensory isolation, and electric shocks. The goal is to learn how to control the human mind. Some were kept in a state of hallucinations for weeks, erasing personality and memory. When the project was revealed, the United States called it a tragic mistake. But some of the documents were destroyed. And still no one knows what exactly they have achieved. 16. Radioactive children, experiments without consent. From the 1940s to the 1960s, experiments were conducted in the United States and the USSR, where children and pregnant women were injected with radioactive substances, without their knowledge. This was done to study the effects of radiation on the body. Some were given milk with uranium. Others, to inhale plutonium particles. Many subjects got sick or died. It was only decades later that it became known that these people never gave their consent. 17. Sleeping brain, Soviet experiments on long-term sleep. In the 1950s of the USSR, secret experiments were conducted, whether a person could be put to sleep for months to study the impact of time on the psyche. The subjects were kept in complete darkness and silence, in a state of artificial sleep. When some were woken up, they didn't remember who they were and where they were. Some of them went crazy. The documents on these experiments are still classified. 18. Experiment with a mirror and Schrödinger's cat. In the 1960s, physicist Hugh Everett proposed the idea of multi-world interpretation. To test it, a group of enthusiasts from Oxford created a laboratory experiment with observation of quantum particles. They argued that the observer influences the result simply by the fact of observation. But later one of them said that in a dream he saw another version of himself living in another world. Coincidence or the effect of quantum consciousness? 19. Nightmares of sleep, experiments with deprivation. In the 1940s and 1950s, scientists in the United States and the USSR tried to find out what would happen if a person did not sleep. The record is 11 days without sleep. Participants lost their orientation, saw hallucinations, and began to confuse the dream with reality. Some experiments were interrupted because the participants began to show aggression and lost control over the body. Sleep is not just a rest. This is the protection of consciousness. 20. Music of death, experiments with a frequency of 19 Hz. In the 1980s, British researchers studied the influence of infrasound, frequencies that a person does not hear. At the frequency of 19 Hz, people felt anxiety, cold, and saw shadows that do not exist. Later it turned out, it is this frequency that coincides with the resonance of the eyeball. That is, a person literally sees ghosts that do not exist. This is how science explains some of the paranormal phenomena. 21. Experiments with the revival of dead bodies. At the beginning of the 20th century, scientists tried to return life to a dead body. Russian physiologist Sergei Bryukhanenko created an artificial blood circulation device, to which he connected the dog's head. The head reacted to the sounds, blinked, and even licked its lips. The experiment was shown in the newsreel. The world was horrified. Where is the line between life and death? 22. Franz Mesmer's human magnetism. In the 18th century, Dr. Franz Mesmer claimed that man radiates a special energy, animal magnetism. He treated patients by running his hands over their bodies and putting them in a trance. Thousands of people assured that they felt the heat and current, although Mesmer did not touch them at all. Later it turned out that the effect was explained by hypnosis and self-suggestion. This is how modern psychotherapy was born, from a strange pseudoscientific ritual. 23. Telepathy and brain echo are secret experiments of the Cold War. During the Cold War, both the United States and the USSR were sure that the mind can be read at a distance. The American Stargate program and Soviet research in Novosibirsk studied people, which, as it was claimed, could convey thoughts, coordinates, and even emotions without words. One of the reports described how a woman from Leningrad guessed symbols, who drew hundreds of kilometers away from her, and did it with an accuracy of 80%. Scientists have not found a rational explanation. When the program was declassified, the US government recognized, yes, experiments with telepathy were conducted. But the results are still under the stamp secret. 24. A person with two brains is a divided consciousness. In the 1960s, surgeon Roger Spey performed an operation, during which he dissected the corpus callosum connecting the two hemispheres of the brain. After the operation, the patient became two personalities in one body. The right hand wrote one word, the left hand wrote another. One eye was reading, the other was looking away. One half of the brain could lie, the other half could tell the truth. So scientists saw for the first time that two independent personalities live in each person, and only a thin strip of neurons holds them together. 25. Experiment with the isolation of consciousness, silent room. There is a room in Minnesota where the noise level is -9 decibels. You can't hear anything there except your own heart and blood running through your veins. Scientists decided to check how long a person can withstand absolute silence. The average result is 30 minutes. Then hallucinations, anxiety, and panic begin. Some people heard voices that didn't exist. One participant said, "The silence here is louder than a scream." This is how the understanding was born: the human mind is not created for absolute rest. 26. The Avatar project is the relocation of consciousness into a robot. In the 2010s, Russian engineers and neurophysiologists launched a project under the code name Avatar, the idea of transferring human consciousness to a mechanical body. The subjects wore helmets with sensors, and they controlled humanoid robots through a neural network. The first results shocked everyone. The brain began to perceive the robot as its own body. People even had phantom sensations when the robot was touched. Now such experiments continue, and the question is no longer if it is possible, and what will happen when a person ceases to be a person. 27. Experiment with pain, studying where patience ends. Scientists from Princeton decided to find out how far a person is willing to go if pain promises a reward. Participants were placed in a cell where they could stop the test at any time, but they were paid money for every minute of patience. After 10 minutes, almost everyone gave up. After 15, there was only one left. After 20, his heart began to beat with interruptions. He was still holding on. The experiment was stopped by doctors. The result, a person is able to suppress pain, but the brain begins to collapse from stress. 28. Freezing life, experiments with cryonics. In 1967, the human body was frozen for the first time in the United States, hoping to bring him back to life one day. Since then, hundreds of people around the world have signed a contract for cryopreservation after death. Scientists have achieved success on animals. In 2022, the rat was thawed after brain freezing, and some of her neurons returned to activity. But the main question remains: if a person can be revived, will it be the same person? Or a copy without a soul? 29. The experiment with a cloned sheep is the beginning of a new era. In 1996, the world heard about Dolly the sheep, the first cloned mammal. Scientists took the nucleus of an adult sheep cell and transplanted it into an egg without DNA. An exact copy was born, with the same genome. Since then, secret experiments on cloning primates and humans have been carried out. Some claim that the first human clones already exist, but it's officially denied. The world again faced a moral dilemma. If you can create a copy of a person, what makes us unique? 30. Experiment sleep without end, an attempt to stop aging. In the laboratory of the University of California, a group of scientists studied the effect of deep sleep on the aging process of cells. Volunteers were put to sleep for 5 to 10 days, using controlled temperature and breathing. When they were taken out, the skin and muscles looked younger. Some claimed that they felt like after rebirth. But one subject couldn't wake up. His brain remained active, but his body did not respond. The project has been closed. 31. Electric dreams, experiments with implants in the brain. Modern neurobiologists have already learned to record and reproduce dreams. The subjects are implanted with microelectrodes that capture brain signals and then translate them into an image. In 2023, one of the participants saw an unknown face in a dream, and the computer restored it to the smallest detail. A face appeared on the recording, which no one from the team recognized. 32. The Resonance Project is an attempt to look into the past with the help of sound. A group of Italian researchers said that she was able to extract sounds from ancient clay jugs, capturing the microvibrations left during their creation. The recording heard voices, knocking, as if talking. Some assured that this was an echo of the past, frozen in the material. Later, the technology disappeared from public access. It is believed that she could read traces of vibrations from any object, up to human bones. 33. Experiment with immortality, Revenant Project. In 2018, a group of bioengineers tried to revive the brain of a deceased person, using nanorobots and artificial proteins. For a short time, they recorded electrical activity, like a person in a sleepy state. The government closed the project, calling it dangerous to ethics and society. But scientists are sure, if you can revive a cell, you can also revive your mind. 34. Experiment with time slowing down, Project Chronos. In the 1980s, a group of Swiss physicists said that managed to change a person's perception of time. Volunteers were placed in an isolated chamber with pulsating lighting and sound pulses, which were synchronized with their brain waves. After 20 minutes, they reported that they had spent several hours there. Some people said they saw their own past. Later, one of the participants disappeared from the laboratory for 47 minutes, and the camera showed that he didn't move at all. Scientists could not explain this phenomenon. This is how the legend of the Chronos Project was born, a person's first attempt to look beyond the edge of time. 35. Experiment with mirror darkness. In 1973, the French psychiatrist Jean Delrieux studied the effect of sensory reflection. He placed patients in a room where everything, the walls, the ceiling, even the floor, were mirrored. The lighting gradually dimmed until the reflections turned into dark silhouettes. A few hours later, the subjects saw doubles moving with a delay, and then they didn't repeat them at all. Some shouted that the mirror is trying to take them away. The experiment was closed, and the room was sealed. 36. The Voice of God project is a sound that causes religious ecstasy. In 2001, neurophysiologist Michael Persinger created a device radiating weak magnetic fields affecting the temporal lobes of the brain. Volunteers reported on visions of light, voices, and the feeling of the presence of a higher power. 80% of the participants described it as a divine experience. But one person, being under the influence, began to speak in an unknown language and claimed that he sees time as a fabric. After that, the device was nicknamed the Helmet of God. And many scientists thought, what if faith is just a brain reaction to a special frequency? 37. Experiment with collective sleep. In the 1990s, Japanese researchers decided to combine the dreams of several people by means of brainwave synchronization. The subjects fell asleep in different capsules connected to a common neural network. On the third day, the two described the same dream, a city that does not exist. They said they met each other there. When the project was closed, one participant stopped waking up, his brain continued to sleep activity. But the body was in a coma. Scientists called it a trap of collective sleep. 38. Experiments with artificial memory. In 2015, neurobiologists from MIT managed to implant false memories in mice, activating the necessary areas of the brain with electrical impulses. Mice began to be afraid of cells where they had never been electrocuted. Later, the technology was tested on people. Volunteers assured that they remember events that did not exist. One woman was instilled that she was a witness to a crime, and she described the details that she physically couldn't see. If memory can be changed, where does reality end? 39. Project Lazar, Return from Death. Scientists from the Institute of Molecular Biology in the USA. In 2019, the pig's brain was revived 4 hours after death. Vessels began to pump blood again, neurons, to transmit signals. Life came back, but unconscious. The next step, the researchers said, is to turn on the memory. But the project was urgently closed when the devices were fixed. Spontaneous activity, similar to a conscious reaction. 40. Experiment with quantum teleportation of consciousness. In 2020, a unique experiment was conducted in China. Movement of information about the state of brain neurons between two laboratories. Officially, it's a quantum data transfer. But the unofficial report said that the subject felt other people's memories. If it's true, a person transmitted a part of himself through space for the first time. 41. Experiment with emotions, empathy machine. Neuropsychologists from Germany created a system which reads a person's emotional reactions and reproduces them in another through electrical impulses. One person was crying, the other, connected to the car, felt the same pain. So science created artificial empathy for the first time. But when they tried to connect 10 people at once, they all experienced a panic attack, as if they were sharing one soul. 42. Experiment with Black Mirror, Digital Resurrection. In 2024, a startup in California launched a program able to recreate the identity of a deceased person based on his messages, video and audio. Artificial intelligence didn't just imitate speech. He remembered things that no one knew about, because he studied on a digital track of millions of data. Relatives claimed that he is really alive. But a few weeks later, the AI started writing messages, which no one has entered. 43. Project Omega, Unification of Minds. According to leaks, a project is planned in the 2030s, in which several volunteers will be connected to one neural network. The goal is to create a collective consciousness where thoughts will be common. But who will control such a mind? And will the personality remain inside? Scientists are already warning. If the project takes place, humanity will cease to be a kind of separate beings. We will become something new, a single mind, which, perhaps, will never want to split up again.